Hello, sports fans. It's Friday, October 25th, 2024. Welcome to Cleats by Dre. I'm Dre. Let's talk some sports. Okay, it's late October. Daylight savings time coming up in a little over a week. We're getting deep into college football season. So in this episode of Cleats, I invited back my business school buds and lifelong Irish fans Mike and James for a mid-season pulse check on Notre Dame football. We pontificate on what's been, well, I'll say it, a fairly boring season to date. We'll talk about what surprised us and what hasn't, and fantasize ahead about more excitement to come. Possible December playoff game in South Bend? Ooh. Well, let's get through the service academies first. But before we get there and talk about the Irish, one quick recap on one of the local New York teams, those New York Knicks, which I previewed a little bit on Tuesday's episode. So Tuesday night, they went into Boston. Title rings given out to those Celtics, and the Knicks got shellacked. There's no other way to say it, right? 132 to 109. It didn't even feel that close. The story here first, it's got to be about Boston, right? A reminder, these weren't Mickey Mouse champs last year. You know, in the regular season, before we even got to the playoffs, we all forget the Knicks got the 2 seed, but they were 14 games behind the Celtics in the 1 seed. The Knicks were then 14 games ahead of the 10 seed, the Hawks. So you could say the gap between 1 and 2, Boston and New York last year, was the same as 2 to 10, New York to Atlanta. You know, even more so, the Celtics team last year, which they're pretty much all back now, it was a pretty legendary team. You got to give them their flowers. Overall, the 13th best record all time, including the playoffs. But even more impressive, 5th best team of all time by point differential, which is useful to just get a sense of how dominant the team was. They beat their opponents by 10.7 points per game. Quick rundown of the top 4, right? You had at number 4, the 1971-72 Lakers, Jerry West and Wilt. Number 3, the 95-96 Bulls, MJ's first full year back, Pippen, Rodman, Kukoc, probably the best Bulls team there. And by the way, an awesome side stat as I was doing research here. The year before, 94-95 Bulls, when Jordan comes back from playing minor league baseball, he only played 17 games that year. He still finished 11th in MVP voting. 17 games, 11th in MVP voting. I'm sure Scotty loved that. Number 2, best team of all time by point differential is the 2016-2017 Warriors. Steph and KD, Draymond, Clay, Iguodala. I think that was KD's first year. I think that was the year after the historical regular season, but then lost to LeBron and Kyrie in the finals. And by point differential, the best team ever is the 1970-71 Bucks with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Oscar Robertson. The other thing that makes the Celtics team great last year, they had the most wins by 25 points in history. 19 games they won by 25 points. They ran away. Right, their strategies live and die by the 3 ball, but they tend to live by it, and they really blew some teams out. They're all back. The team's all back. It's extended. You got to put some respect on that name. And that team, they didn't even have Kristaps, Porzingis. So that's the thing. And we'll get to the Knicks, right? The story's second about the Knicks, but like the undercurrent from like the improvements the Knicks made and pushing their chips in the middle, you got to recognize how still big the gap was last year, and it's not okay for the Knicks just to be a little bit better this year. They got to be a lot better. So in that season preview, right, I said there would be growing pains with this team. Just how quickly everybody came together. I expected, and I still expect, about being 500 at the end of the calendar year 2024. I'll say, and I'll take some notes here from Ben Ritholtz, NBA on X, a great, really strong Knicks follower that knows the ins and outs. I'd agree with him. Don't worry about the offense yet, right? In this game, this one game, they scored 124.1 points per 100 possessions. 124 points per 100 possessions. That would have led the league last year. That would have been more than the Celtics or the Pacers put up last year. So even though they lost by 23, they scored enough. The defense. Defense is the area where growth is going to be needed. With all the screening and back screening and the 5-out that the Celtics play, this defensive unit just really wasn't ready. They need to be thinking with one big collective brain, anticipating together. It's going to take time. Ben on X shared one particular clip where Towns and Bridges, new teammates, so out of sync, defending one switch, Towns literally physically pushes Bridges out to the perimeter to his man. The good news, we have Thibs. You know, the man lives, breathes defense, thinks about it, consumes them all hours of the day, I'm sure. We have 81 games with Tibbs. I think they'll figure it out, or they'll get close to figuring it out. And sometimes an early loss like this is the best thing that could happen. So, one game, you know, I think it's a marker, right? It's a reminder. This is what championship looks like. Up Friday night, those dang Indiana Pacers come to the Garden. Really no rest for this weary defense as they figure it out. But look, we're back in the NBA full swing. Let's enjoy it. In other news, right, the World Series kicks off Friday, later tonight. Yanks Dodgers. We'll touch on the first few games in the next pod. It should be really an exciting series with, definitely got star power and legendary teams, legendary colors, legendary stadiums. Let's enjoy it. But for now, let's give the Notre Dame Fighting Irish some airtime. I'll kick it to myself, Mike, and James in a conversation we recorded Wednesday night. Enjoy. Okay, listeners. A couple months ago, we dipped our toes into college football with a season preview on one of this podcaster's alma maters, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. That episode remains the third most listened to in Cleats by Dre history. And this is episode 29. So we had to bring back the panel, my fellow NBA Sports Business Club leadership team, to update us with takes on the Irish after 7 games into the season. So I'm welcoming back my two Notre Dame lifers, Mike and James. First, Midwest Mike, fresh off of some weeknight tennis, was it tonight? How are you doing, Mike?
Indeed. Thanks for having me on tonight, Andre. We pulled out a 3-set doubles paddle tennis match tonight.
Okay.
If we run out of Notre Dame football to talk about, I can give you guys a point-by-point breakdown of me being a stubborn guy on the tennis court.
I
I'm
thought,
good, thanks.
yeah, I thought it was going 4 sets. That was the text.
Yeah, no,
Huh?
that's just a typo.
Wait, what is a paddle set? Is it still like 6 games or?
Yeah, it's same as tennis. We play ladies rules, only 3
Mhm.
sets, and then it's kind of a doubles game, and yeah, it's very similar to tennis, just played kind of on an elevated surface with heated coils underneath. So it's a winter sport out here in the Midwest.
Um, I'm gonna guess there's probably listeners actually on the edge of their seats based on how many people play paddle or pickle, whatever we call it. But I'll be with James. We'll give a no thanks for now on that. But welcome, Mike. And yeah, we're also welcoming back James. So Twitter's unofficial official Matthew McConaughey muse, James, aka Jimmy Guards. And I noticed earlier this week, James, some kudos and love from ESPN's own Scotty Van Pelt. James, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dre. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, it's wild how X works sometimes. There's like college football guy I like a lot, Bunky Perkins. He's an Ole Miss guy, and he's really plugged in. I think he knows Scott Van Pelt. He retweeted me years ago, and Van Pelt followed me, and we share some like personal life experiences. So we've had a couple direct messages back and forth, and he's the man, great dude.
He
And
know he knows
so
you. Like he knows that you're the guy, you're the McConaughey guy. and I think he's envious to a certain extent.
Well, I mean, I feel like he probably has McConaughey's number in his phone, so I think we needed, to go break bread together,
Dude,
have some tacos.
more more to come. More to come at LIFE in life.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
Fun. All right, good having you boys. That was a fun episode we did to kick off the year. We went deep. We went back to your roots, where you started with the Irish. We broke down this team a bit. Made some predictions. So we're 7 games in now. And it's 7 out of 12 until the playoffs. So my first question, as I've reviewed this season, is this the most boring Notre Dame regular season since whenever? But just that take of how have you been taking in the season so far? And why does the word boring come to mind for me? James, you want to take first shot at the apple?
Yeah, it might be the stage of life we're in that our weekends are pretty full. Three of us running around with little kids, but so the Irish are usually just kind of on, and I try to be dialed in, play to play, but um I think partially it's boring because we don't know how good they are. Like the schedule is a joke. Um, they've had two decent tests, with at A&M, nice win, and
Mm-hmm.
then they played Louisville at home, and they probably could have lost that
Mm-hmm.
game, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
The Cardinals, we can go into that. I did a little box score analysis, and Louisville outplayed the Irish. So we don't know how good they are. But then you look at the rankings and you look at the teams around them, and like, I don't think a lot of the teams around them are any good either. Well, I don't know what's good anymore. So I mentioned on the last podcast the college football we used to watch as kids, where there was like 12 passes a game and you just burned play clock. In modern times, we're a little bit spoiled. We like the high flying offense, and it would be fun to see Notre Dame finally have like a dynamic dual threat, or a true guy who could, spin it. Instead, we're just kind of watching like Aldi version Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
In terms of Riley, like a
Yeah,
Tebow,
Riley Leonard.
it
And
is it is like
seems like a nice enough guy. The guys like him.
right, right.
Um, can can't hit he can hit a guy deep if he's got no one around him 10 yards. So we're just seeing a lot of like, I don't know, running back by committee, and the quarterback's part of that committee. He's part of that running back room.
He is. He is. Yeah.
Well, I guess so. If I jump in here,
Go ahead.
like, so Kyle Field, game one, guards as a dual degree holder doesn't come. I could not speak highly enough of that environment. I bought my wife like 7 pairs of cowboy boots, uh, four jean skirts and like 3 cowboy hats after the game, just digging the vibes of Southern football. So like that Texas
Well,
A&M game and in that environment, like college football doesn't get better than that, but like in terms of a season, like nobody should play the best game of their season the first game of their season. Like, the best scene in a movie isn't the first scene in a movie. Um, you know, in a lot of this, I not to get kind of like very philosophical about it, but like I think Swarbrick just bet on the wrong horse, right? Like he partnered with the ACC. He was very Eastern focused, and the reality is, it's like, yeah, this season's boring, but a lot of them lately have been boring because we won't get the service academies off our schedule, and the ACC is the worst football conference in America, and it's getting worse. Um, if Swarbrick was a true innovator and he respected that football was the lifeblood of Notre Dame athletics department, I mean, Notre Dame would have tried to broker a deal with the SEC or Big Ten or just flat out joined them. I don't know anyone that cares that much about Notre Dame being independent in football. We're in a conference for 26 other sports. Like, but the reality is like, yeah, the schedule this year is boring, but it's boring built upon ACC opponents, and now like we're gonna have faux enthusiasm for some service academy games, when a bunch of very well coached, disciplined kids go out there and I mean for Notre Dame that's kind of like I was at a Halloween party last week and this guy came up to me. His daughter's in fourth grade. They play flag football, and he's like, "Hey, we want our daughters to play your sons in flag football." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't really want to do that. It's like a no-win, right? Like, if somehow you guys beat us, we're just embarrassed, and if we win, everyone just says you should win." I mean, that's how I feel Notre Dame's games against the service academies are every single time. It's like, even if these teams are perceived as good this year, the minute Notre Dame beats them soundly it feels as if the perception of that victory is immediately is retracted in terms of being a quality victory. So yeah, I
Wait,
would. I actually think that Notre Dame athletic department needs to rethink the way they need to rethink their current structure, unless they feel that the others that prevalence in other sports or prominence in other sports is really where they want to get. I feel like the football program is somewhat becoming a national afterthought based on the way that they've structured their football schedule.
well, Mike, was that take possible without belittling like women's, youth sports? Could you have
That was pretty misogynistic.
taken a different approach to the
Well,
end game?
I was only
We're
alluding to like
WNBA
I mean,
positive on this podcast. I don't know if you
well,
listen.
these fourth grade girls, they're tremendous athletes. Our fourth grade boys are great athletes. I'm only saying the Notre Dame perception of victory against the service academy, it's never one that's perceived, not since like, World War II and the days thereafter. Those victories are never perceived as quality, meaningful victories.
Yeah, so the quick tangent on the ACC thing, because like I'm with you where like the ACC's been bad lately, and I'm doing a quick research. I think we joined partially in 2013, around then, and like around that time, Florida State was winning titles. Clemson was coming on. It's funny, Stanford I see is top four in 2013. They in the ACC now. Louisville was top 10. So
Virginia
like,
Tech
is
used
it
to be
is it
good.
foresight, or are we just doing like hindsight 2020, or like could they have had more foresight back then, or the ACC was actually good back then?
I think, I mean, Notre Dame's just finicky about stuff. Like, I think they enjoy like making the Big Ten beg. Like, Big Ten people hate that Notre Dame's
Yeah.
independent.
Hmm.
And they also hate that if Notre Dame was like, yeah, we'd like to join, like, the Big Ten would be like, absolutely. Like, when can you come?
Hmm.
Um, but Notre Dame's funny. Like, they like to be aligned with good schools, and the ACC has good schools. I mean, it's not every day you can line up academically with Florida State, and I'm just fucking around. But and then just the history of things. Like, yes, we've played Navy since George Washington was on the team. Um, I was actually in New York
Legacy,
City the
yeah.
first time Notre Dame lost to Navy in like 40 years.
Hmm.
And I think I cried at the bar. I was like so embarrassed because that's all it is. It's lose-lose. And I guarantee you we will lose at least one starter on defense in the Navy and Army games, maybe one in each.
Jesus,
Uh,
can't afford that.
those games are a beating. Like it's like uh so you have that component, and then the ACC is just down. It's like
Mhm.
you close the season at USC. Who I don't know if USC is any good. So we've had these years where we've made the playoff before it even expanded, and uh, we kind of like snuck in off of an easy schedule, and then you run into Clemson or Alabama, and you're
Mhm.
like, oh,
Nah.
this is football. This is big boy football. And, we got our asses whipped.
Mhm.
So, it was a weird run last year. They went 4 weeks in a row of playing ranked teams, with no bye. And so maybe it's just one of those deals like with, Florida State almost won the national championship last year, and this year they're a joke. So
Yeah.
Notre Dame there's nothing Notre Dame can do about that.
Hmm.
But if as purely fans, and Andre, let me know if you disagree. Like, I mean, you give me three three good games against a Big Ten team as a member of the Big Ten Conference, or three good games against an SEC teams as a member of the SEC, and then even the weaker sisters of those conference, there's attractive games. Like as a fan, I would much rather be a part of those conferences than maintain independence and play Duke and North Carolina State and Wake Forest like regularly. Do you guys agree or disagree?
I agree. So like for instance, let's look at I pulled up the Big Ten schedule this week. Even their undercard games, there's like good storylines. So Rutgers at USC, that's the weirdest conference matchup in the history of the sport. 11 p.m. Eastern kickoff. Nebraska, Ohio State, Washington, Indiana, Illinois, Oregon, Northwestern Iowa, Maryland, Minnesota, Penn State at Wisconsin, and then Michigan State versus Michigan. Like that's a solid card. I mean, you would want to be involved, I think, in a league like that, or at least be able to build a
Definitely.
schedule
Yeah. I mean,
that rivals
definitely.
that. And it's getting harder and harder to do that.
The Big Ten and SEC have emerged as the power too. I just don't know if it was as easy to see that coming in 2013. If ACC had played their cards differently, maybe they would have been more aggressive. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
But the point is that Notre Dame as an independent, they have access to either of those conferences based on, and to me, I actually think the SEC might be the more attractive conference to join just because Notre Dame becomes the geographic outlier in that
mhm.
conference, right?
I would have
Whereas
preferred that. That's why they haven't wanted the
the
Big
SEC,
Ten.
the
Yeah.
SEC values Notre Dame more,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just feel like, and you can, if you play the SEC, you can maybe lose three games and get in the playoff, whereas like Notre
Mhm.
Dame. So I'm just looking for, I feel like a Colin Coward here, but I'm just looking for good games,
I'm
and
going to
42 to
contradict
7, 42 to
myself.
7, I don't watch most of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I'm going to contradict myself because I do think when Clemson had their little mini dynasty, one of their biggest advantages was being in a weak ACC, and they
Totally.
didn't have to like get the shit kicked out of them, even in games they won. They didn't have to go through the SEC or a Big Ten grind. Like they were playing NC State and then Virginia, and like that was a pretty easy
Yeah.
path just to getting in the playoff.
Look at Oklahoma this year. They can't hold their muster in the SEC.
No,
So I said boring because like maybe it's just like James, you're saying stage of life. I know on Saturdays this fall I've been at Costco, I've been at a pickle festival, I've been at a fall festival last weekend. If there were big games,
Wow.
I wouldn't have necessarily done all those things. But if
is Pickle Festival a euphemism?
no, that's the real thing. We live,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
little pickle farm around here. It's a real
Another
deal.
euphemism?
It's a big
That name
word
of a
for
bar?
this podcast.
He's in Sean Combs country over there. So
Okay,
we
okay.
gotta interrogate those types of
So
insinuations.
A&M was a different beast, but then Northern Illinois, Purdue, Miami, Ohio, Louisville, Stanford, Georgia Tech. So that's just where, and going 6-1 through that slate to me might be the most boring outcome because like James, you were saying, we don't know how good this team is. Seven
No.
and 0, we'd be pumped. 5-2, 4-3, we'd be figuring out who our next head coach is and looking at candidates. But it's like 6-1 is that purgatory where every week in the 12th or 13th spot in the playoff bubble. It'll get more interesting coming up. It feels like it's just kind of floated along the season.
There's better schedules ahead, right? But next year's schedule is better. I think 26 is better, but yeah, I'd like to. I definitely think I think where Notre Dame is as a program right now, it is certainly worth considering whether or not like looking at the feasibility of the long-term feasibility of maintaining
Mhm.
independence with the SEC and Big Ten continuing to accumulate power and teams that you want to schedule.
Yeah. Let's see if Notre Dame's new AD, Bavakwa, Bavik,
Pete
Pete
Favacqua, yeah,
Bavakwa.
he's
Let's
got
see if
my
he has some
seconds on his
foresight.
name.
Yeah. All right. Let's get further into talking about the season. But first, Mike, you really do look like a young Tim Walz. I gotta say, you got that aesthetic coming through. If anyone wanted to imagine.
Appreciate that little off recording callback from Andre here. Yeah, I did dress up for Halloween. I dressed up as Cochise, who was one of the police officers in the Beastie Boys video Sabotage,
Oh,
which was
yeah.
a which
Timely
was
reference.
yeah, which was a pretty there was like seven people that recognized it. They kind of nerded out on it. But yeah, like having to permanently wear a young Tim Walz costume probably wouldn't have been something that I would have signed off on as a younger man. But I'm living that life,
You
you know.
are. You're
Brad Pitt would
set
have
up,
been better.
set up for Halloween. Um, let's get to Irish, right? 7 games in. What surprised you about the first 7 games? What hasn't surprised you? Walsey, I mean, Mike, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what didn't surprise me, right? So like in the season preview, right, I characterized the cornerback room and the running back room as national title level. I think like I continue to think that Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, that's an elite level running back room. I think that Price, there's been lot of commentary that he's an inefficient runner, but he's super explosive. Like if he gets a crease. And Love actually, I feel like has actually adapted his game to what I would consider a below average offensive line. Love I think is stronger at taking what's there, whereas I think Price tries to, he's always he's seeking additional yardage. In terms of the cornerback room, right? Like, at the beginning of the season, we had Ben Morrison and Christian Gray, right? And the word was that Gray was actually going to be an upgrade from Hart. And I thought, I think what makes the Notre Dame defense go has been that they put their cornerbacks on islands, and then they have great freedom to operate with their other 9 defensive players, right? And obviously, you've got whether you're a nickel or base defense, they've got a lot of freedom by locking up probably the 2 top wide receivers of the other team. And Al Golden has a nice job of figuring out how do I want to construct a defense. So I feel like from what I expected, the running back room and the cornerback room have delivered as promised, though Morrison is now out.
Mm.
In terms of what's unexpected, and I'll let guards jump in. I think the manner in which Riley Leonard has kind of delivered for Notre Dame has been, um, it's been more run centric than I expected, but I definitely think Denbrock has done a nice job adapting to what is emerging as Leonard's skill set in this offense, and I do think the offense is becoming more efficient uh, under Denbrock. But there was a lot of word in the preseason that the Notre Dame wide receiver room was emerging as a wide receiver room of interest. But I feel like with the limitations, and we highlighted that it was I thought the offensive line was really driving limitation, but I do think Riley Leonard has kind of driven Denbrock to kind of have to find a very specific way to be efficient as an offense. So I thought Leonard was going to be more dynamic in the passing game this year.
Mm. Mm. What do you think, James?
Uh, my biggest surprise and my least
Yeah.
surprised is the loss to Northern Illinois. It's like a shock, but not a shock.
Both sides of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, you know, it's like we said in the last episode, I want it to work so badly with Marcus Freeman. He can't have that happen. And uh the schedule is going to do him a lot of favors. Like it's gonna give him it's gonna buy him some juice because he's got a path to the playoffs and no one's gonna get fired for going to the playoffs. Uh yeah, my in seriousness, I'm not at all surprised by the defense. Now, granted, I don't think they've played any really good offenses. Um and I was not bullish on Riley Leonard. I was like, yeah, nice pickup in the portal. I was like, I feel like we're Notre Dame. We should be recruiting and developing blue
Mm.
chips, not like getting cast offs from mid Power Five schools like Wake and Duke. Speaking of ACC
I
alignment,
think cast off is a strong word. Both those teams would be happy to have him, but both those guys back.
Yeah, I know. I mean, yeah,
He got
going six
promoted.
and six is
Those guys
important.
get promoted to the big time touchdown
Yeah, I
Jesus
mean,
level.
those boys got kind of enterprise rent-a-car upgrades. Like, hey, you're not getting the midsize anymore. Go with the SUV at Notre Dame. But these guys are well. Somebody actually said something interesting on X, and I can't remember if it was a coach, but he said NFL guys don't go to the portal; they go to the NFL.
Hmm.
And if you want
Yeah,
to win big at Notre Dame,
Yeah.
if you're living in the portal at quarterback, you're trying to win with sub NFL talent, and that's what Notre Dame's trying to win with at the quarterback position.
Yeah. That's a great point. Um, I mean, the things for me was I wasn't surprised with the passing game struggling earlier on. I mean, Riley threw for 3 touchdowns all of last year. Like I didn't think this passing game would hum. I maybe it's finding it's definitely finding more success than it did at the start of the year. Um, what what has surprised me as we're sticking on the offense, I knew Riley would run, but the red zone touchdown efficiency, like we're scoring touchdowns in the red zone, and that's a big thing for me. We're like at any level of football, right? You don't want to kick field goals when you get down there, but this team's punching it in. They're not down there as much as other schools, but they're punching it in, and a big part's Riley's legs. I have a stat break for this, right? So, 22 red zone attempts so far for the Irish. They've scored 20 times overall, 18 touchdowns. So 18 out of 22 is 82% efficiency. That's sixth in the country.
that's impressive. Um, Another like pleasant
Yeah.
surprise was there were so many concerns about the offensive line because of injuries
Mhm.
going into the year. And then, in hindsight, it's like refreshing to look back and be like, we're Notre Dame. Like we figure it out on the offensive line now. Like we'll coach guys up. We have depth. We'll take a freshman and we'll coach him up quick. The other thing I was going to just say on Leonard was it would be great to catch Denbrock, midnight, couple scotches in him, and be like, "Hey, my coach, what's it like going in 1 year from coaching Jaden Daniels to coaching Riley Leonard?"
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be like it's like, oh, I drove a leased Ferrari for a year, and now I'm driving a Volkswagen Golf. Like,
'Cause
it's
he didn't pick Riley, right? Riley was here when he came on,
Yeah, I
right?
think Denbrock sees the big picture. I think
Yeah.
first of all, he probably doesn't like Ryan Kelly that much,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
like most assistants. And then I think he likes Notre Dame, and he sees the big picture that he's like, he's not going to have this quarterback, for years and years and years. So
Well, guards, you called him like Tebow Light. Like I'm dating myself here, but Michigan had a running back in the day, Joe Morris. You think like Emmett Smith, Tebow. Like I think one of the best things Riley Leonard does is like he gets another yard or two after first contact, like every single time.
He's a big
He
guy.
just
yeah,
has a knack of like if we're looking at red zone efficiency, like Leonard often gets hit at the line of scrimmage and gets 2 or 3 more yards. And when you're in the red zone, that's the difference between field goal and touchdown. And it also I think it makes Notre Dame relatively like I think I don't know if you have this stat, Andre, but I think we're pretty good on fourth down too, and we
Mm.
often lean on Riley Leonard in fourth down situations, and fourth and short situations, and I think he does have a natural ability just to find his way to get that additional yard. That'd probably be my greatest compliment to him, to be honest.
and to that point, I'd be curious how many negative plays we have this year. It can't be
Mm.
many.
Mm.
We keep it so vanilla in the passing game. I
Mm.
can't imagine like he's standing in the pocket for, long periods of time. And I feel like our running backs, we run downhill. If, a lot of football is kind of no shit, but if Notre Dame gets behind schedule on a drive, like if they get into like second and 14, it's going to be a problem. Like they can't, but if they're chipping away, like one of the great running backs has a 5 yard carry, and then Leonard like has a Johnny Hustle 3 yard carry. and then you got 3rd and 2, and like you're going to get that in 2 downs.
And I think that's why Notre Dame strongly I've been looking at the snap counts. Notre Dame strongly prefers Love as their running back in terms of snap count, and I think it's just because Price is if you look at negative plays for the season, I do feel like Jadarian has more often put Notre Dame off schedule, whereas I feel like Love has even though Jadarian may be more explosive, I feel like Love has kept us on schedule more, which I feel like is Denbrock. With Denbrock's the hand he's dealt, I feel like that's the mandate right now.
Love is also a really good run blocker. Um, and I don't have stats on this, but I've seen some clips that people have posted on X, and for a guy like Riley, you need a run blocker for a running back, which is crazy to say. Um, I got the fourth down stat. So Notre Dame is tied for 18th in the country on fourth down conversion, 71%. That's pretty good. For an offense that's not like putting up the yards, the points that other offenses are, 17th in fourth down percentage, and then mine was sixth in red zone efficiency.
Yeah.
Positive.
Without like without having a typical Notre Dame tight end, which I think a good tight
Mm-hmm.
end is huge on 4th down. Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
But I would say, like, if we talked about the broader schedule and like Notre Dame's potential, Notre Dame certainly feels like more of a Baltimore Ravens-esque team, or like the Commanders this year have been very effective. Notre Dame does feel like, in the bigger picture, and these games have been very well situated for Notre Dame. Notre Dame is well situated to play from ahead, right? Because playing from ahead, you can dictate terms. And I feel like with this schedule, we're well situated to dictate terms. What's interesting is, could we play better teams? We did, in a way, dictate terms against Texas A&M, but could we play better teams? I do feel like some of Notre Dame's success or lack of success in the playoffs might be the early game outcomes would be very indicative of how the game would go, because I feel like we're the type of team that could lean on a team just based on the way that we play that game.
Yeah. I mean, Notre Dame gets up 10-0 on, I'd say, even any team in the country, they take care of their football. They can like grind out a win.
Mhm.
And anyone's beatable this year. Penn State's third. Okay. Like this is a wide open year. Um,
So,
but
yeah,
the
go
same
ahead.
by the same token, if Notre Dame got down by like 14 to Oregon, like it's curtains.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, the dichotomy, because I, I was I was the one calling for Steve Angeli like early in the year, game Northern Illinois game. What was the next game? I think Miami of Ohio was fine, but or maybe it wasn't. What was the game we were like struggling in the first half? Was that Miami of Ohio? Yeah, that was
Miami
Miami of
was the
Ohio.
fourth game.
We rolled on Purdue.
Those
Um,
plucky MAC teams, man.
are like are
Purdue
we?
was the third game, but they kind of Purdue's brutal, but Riley was like shaky as all get out in the first quarter against Purdue.
Yeah. So are we changing our ceiling a little bit of this team? Because we sounds like we collectively feel better about the offense run by Riley, than we felt after the first four games. Or I don't even was he that good against Louisville? I don't think he was that great against Louisville.
No,
Was
and I
it?
wanted to just for kicks because people will point to Louisville as like being a good win.
Yeah.
First downs in
What you
that
got?
game, Louisville 19, Notre Dame 11. Total yards, Louisville 395, Notre Dame 280. Notre Dame had 163 passing yards. Got outgained on the ground. Um, Won the turnover battle by one. Like, I don't know.
It was an
They
ugly
lost
game.
the stat sheet, that's for sure.
Yeah,
And
it was ugly.
here's what Denbrock, it is a perfect example of Riley Leonard. He threw the ball 23 times for 163 yards. Like that's not
What is that, like eight, 7 or 8
seven,
per?
Yeah, we're looking at like a seven, you
Yeah.
know.
which
But
in
that's him.
college
That's
is
him. He's never gonna do higher than that. Like he's not. But
But
like,
the interesting about that game, Notre Dame also turned the ball over in that game. I think Notre Dame, yeah, I mean, like you said, guards, Leonard is a fabulous like tailgate quarterback when it comes to the deep ball, like a guy that you would think could throw a football 30 yards at a tailgate, but like I mean, he doesn't really seem to see it either. I mean, there's been a running theme this year of him throwing into double coverage downfield and not really like threading needles. He's
No,
just, I mean, that's why I mean, like, because there's just whether it's the wide receiver position or Riley's um just dynamic ability in the passing game, like it doesn't feel like we're winning anything over the top at all this year, unless it's wide open.
That's yeah. That's the part of the ceiling, right? The ceiling depends on who else is out there. And I guess not as many teams are stepping up and being dominant. I would say there's been some other very well played games that I can't see a note. I like even the Alabama Georgia game. I can't see Notre Dame hanging in that game. Um, so we're starting to
I
get
agree with that.
towards.
I agree with that for sure. I definitely think Alabama and Georgia have more ways. I mean, Georgia went down significantly in that game, and they were able to come back. Georgia went up on Texas and leaned on them. So I definitely think that Notre Dame has a very specific way to win, and I don't think that they're not as dynamic as like what I would call the elite teams are not as elite as what I would consider like the Devonta Smith, Mac Jones Alabama team. So I think one thing that's disappointing as a Notre Dame fan is it feels like there's a like Michigan won last year, right? And Michigan won in what I would call like they were dominant in their own way, but dominant in a Midwestern football way. So, but I definitely don't feel that Notre Dame has a way. There's less ways they can solve the problems of a game against really good teams.
No, I looked at one of my previous episodes. I was looking at the notes. Uh, Passing offenses, right, have won championships, and there was like 8 of the last 10 like title games. The winning team threw for like 300 yards. Even like
wow.
Jay Coker, like in Alabama, like he threw for 335. Like the only ones that weren't was JJ McCarthy last year threw for 140. They didn't need him. And then I think the two Hurts game, Alabama didn't throw much there, but like it's fairly unprecedented, except for last year in Michigan because they incredible defense, incredible running game. Is that the model, like very recent model for this team? But that Michigan team also built up to that over 3 years, like with kind of a lot of the same team. I can't say that about Notre
I
Dame.
mean, Elko, who was the defensive line coach at Notre Dame, was at Michigan. He's actually with the Chargers now this year.
No, you're saying no, not is it Elko? No, it's
Isn't that the name of the D line coach?
what the heck's his name?
Elko's at A&M now.
Yeah, Elko's at A&M. You're
Oh,
thinking of I know who you're talking about though. I'll look it up.
uh, but anyway, so yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm Googling it now.
Yeah, yeah. He was the defensive coordinator for a
Mike
game under
Elston, Mike Elston. So,
yeah.
but Elston built up
Elko.
a very elite Notre Dame defensive line, and then he established that at Michigan,
Yeah.
and then Michigan also, Michigan was able to be lousy with draft picks across multiple levels of their defense and their offensive line.
Let's look ahead. I mean, we're getting towards that point, right? So 5 games left. The service academies, Virginia, Florida State, USC. Um, Interesting that stat I had on the service academy, the QB, the red zone efficiency. Both Army and Navy are in the top 6 of red zone efficiency and touchdowns. Navy leads the country. 22 out of 23 red zone trips are touchdowns. Just interesting as you watch those games and seeing, touchdowns when they get down there. But do you guys see any slip ups in the rest of the schedule, or just to also take it to your predictions? Are you holding where you started the year? Have you revised, upgraded, downgraded? James, why don't you go first?
I'd say the slip potential. Oh, lost to Northern Illinois. There's definitely a potential for a slip. Here's what scares me is if they get down to a service academy, like in the second quarter, Notre Dame might have the ball like three times the rest of the game. It might get three possessions. Talk about leaning on a team, but it's the service academies are a nice story. Uh, Shout out for not being in wars right now. Like we've got good service academy players, but
Byproduct.
neither team has played anybody. I mean, we're
No.
talking bad teams. Uh, so nice story. Notre Dame, I think Denbrock, if there's a time when this offense, this blah Notre Dame offense could pop off, it should be against the service academies. Like we should be able to just out athlete them. Um, and I know like everyone's like, why did Notre Dame open up as a 14-point favorite to Navy? So I think Vegas kind of knows what they're doing. And yeah, that
Yeah.
line got hammered down, but Navy has beaten Charlotte, Air Force, terrible. UAB, terrible. Memphis, bleh. Temple, awful. Bucknell, ugh. I
Dude,
mean,
but they're
come on.
covering though. Like Army is like 6-0-1 against the spread. Navy's 5-1. I mean, I know it's that schedule, but like I don't know what to make of those teams this year.
So
We don't know.
I have a thought process on. So, if you look at the strength of Notre Dame's team. So we mentioned two on the podcast, right? Which are running back and cornerback,
Hmm.
and quarterback's evolving because they like this prospect more. The third strength on the team is interior defensive line, right? So Howard Cross, Riley Mills are elite upperclassmen, interior defensive linemen. We just got Rubio back playing, right? And fundamental to beating service academies, I believe, is like winning the interior defensive or interior battle between the offensive line and defensive line. So if I'm projecting out to the season, I feel like Notre Dame should be well situated to win those games against Navy and Army. And I know Navy, though I haven't watched them, I understand they've evolved their offense. But, the strength of Notre Dame's team is the spine of that defense up the middle. And I feel like provided that Cross and Mills are healthy, I feel like, we much of the, like, if you look at the sack totals for Notre Dame this year, Mills and Cross lead the team in sacks. Having elite interior defensive linemen, I think, is going to situate us well to kind of roll out this schedule. I would actually be more nervous about like a USC. USC is always a pickle on the road,
Yeah,
and even though they're down, like they present they're going to present problems on the outside with kind of what's becoming like a less experienced outside cornerback core. Whereas I think against kind of some of these more limited athletic teams, but very well schemed teams. I think we've got good answers on the inside of the defense.
My one thought on USC is three straight losses. Is that team going to be quitting on Lincoln Riley by that time?
They've lost four games by a total of 14 points. I mean, they've been in the hunt with Notre Dame quality teams all year, right? And
Yeah,
they're
talented. Don't get me wrong, talented.
yeah, I mean, so USC that's the thing with USC. USC is a typical bully, right? Like when they're up, they'll smack you around, but like when USC's down, that's a quit and ask school. But
Hmm.
I guess the question is, they've been very close in a lot of games. Like, could that become like the signature USC season to represent like how well they've actually played? I think USC is the biggest threat on the schedule.
I agree.
Yeah, I think I'm curious too. Mike, you're talking about interior line. What about like young linebackers against the option, the Navy? We got good linebackers, but a lot of them are young besides Kaiser.
Yeah, I mean, Kingston, Viliasa, KVA. I can't
Nailed
say
it.
his name. He's definitely flashed as a
Yeah.
freshman. You've got Kaiser
Bowen,
good, and then Bowen is now like he's leading the team in snap counts and he's flashing. I mean, like
he's been good.
so certainly, yeah, the linebacking core probably. I mean, you would assume a young linebacking core can be manipulated, but I definitely feel like I feel like there's talent there, and again, if I looked at the Notre Dame defensive line, for example, we've lost our two. They call them Vipers,
Hmm.
Bello
Batella,
and
Bubakar.
and Bubakar. But like, Navy and Army, like having an elite pass rusher isn't necessary, but we're pretty solid across like the defensive line in terms of what I would consider kind of big bodied, able to engage the run. So I feel good about our defensive construction against teams less dynamic than USC.
All right, so then let's, we talked about where they might slip up. I think you guys think USC. Um, I do think they still have a slip up left. So I'll do predictions first, right? I started season preview pod. I said 10-2. Then I thought they'd lose to A&M though. So when they beat A&M, I went to 11-1. I didn't expect that the one loss to come so quickly to Northern Illinois. I mean, I still feel like another loss is coming here. Something about the way it's aligning with both Army and Navy being ranked and like undefeated, something doesn't feel right. Both those games are going to be either in the New York City area. I'm going to be away this weekend, otherwise I'd be at the Navy game. Um, so I have them 10-2. Um, one of those losses coming from Army or Navy, and I don't think that's good enough to get in the playoffs. I think if you look at other teams being in the two-loss area, at BYU, Indiana, Iowa State kind of being up there, and I think we get punished, right? Get punished for the Northern Illinois loss, like those bad losses on a subjective committee. Though another potential loss, I don't think 10-2 gets us in, where other years it might get us in. But that's me for now. Mike, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I'm gonna I'm gonna agree with you that it's 10-2. I can't pick the loss. I think USC is the biggest threat. Um, this is a team it's a team that's been ravaged by injuries, and they've actually showed pretty good program depth by managing those injuries. But the best player on the team, Morrison, is hurt. They've got a freshman offensive tackle. They lost their center. They've lost their two rush ends, which we just mentioned. So it's like, uh, you know, program depth is being tested, and I think late October, November is when injuries can result in a challenging loss. So I'll go 10-2, but I can't pick the loss.
But do you think they're in the playoffs at 10-2?
No, I think that um yeah, I
Yeah,
just think
yeah,
I think they're just not interesting right now, right? I mean,
they're
I
not.
think
Yeah.
to get in at 10-2, you've probably got to be a top 10 team,
Mm.
right? Because you've got the non-power four, and then potentially between the ACC as well. Well, the Big 12 will definitely that team would qualify, but the ACC may have maybe Miami. So you definitely have to be probably like a top 10 team. And I don't know that 10-2 gets Notre Dame in the top 10 in the
No,
community.
no. All right, James, what do you think?
Uh, so weird to think, year one, it's so hard to picture what this playoff's going to look like because there will be two lost teams in there. Um, I don't think Notre Dame's going to lose another game. And I'm not saying they're great, but if Notre Dame goes 11-1, they're in for sure.
Definitely.
And I think, oh man, the college football playoff committee would love to have a home game at Notre Dame in that first round. Like they would, how beautiful that would be. December under the lights in South Bend. They would kill for that. But yeah, if they trip up, I think they're going to need a lot of help. The teams around them, which again, I think like are deeply flawed. I mean, just right around them, like or in front of them, BYU and Iowa State. I mean, come on. So they'll need a little bit of help around them. Of
Garth, you
people
got a big
losing
audience
conference games.
in the American Southwest. Are the Aggies going to the playoffs?
They also have a schedule that kind of like favors them a little bit. And what's wild is it might come down to, well, Saturday hosting LSU is going to be huge. And then it's pretty smooth sailing. Well, at South Carolina is now looking harder. but it might come down to the game versus Texas to close the season on Thanksgiving weekend. So that'll be
Wow.
absolutely batshit crazy in this state.
When's the last time
Notre
those
Dame
schools
A&M.
played?
2010-ish,
11, whenever,
no, 12,
yeah,
when A&M
and
left
then
for the
left.
SEC.
That'd be wild.
Notre Dame A&M rematch in the playoff could be fun.
Yeah.
Well, so that's yeah.
What
So
else?
James is more optimistic than both of us again, Mike, and he was right about the week one. He said Irish would beat A&M. We both said no, so it's good
He
to have
also
an
said Connor
optimist.
Wegman was a first-round draft pick.
That's true.
Yeah, hey, we're not keeping tally on everything we say, all
That's
right?
true. I've changed my
Um,
tune.
but I like the exercise of even fantasizing about the matchups because we're fans at the end of the day. We talked about these games are boring. We're allowed to fantasize about a December home playoff game or even road playoff game.
Oh, it's
Um,
gonna be amazing.
I mean,
It's
what do
gonna be
we?
really cool.
So if Notre Dame is a 7 or 8, that could be LSU coming to town. Brian Kelly could be Clemson. If we're more in the 11, it could be going to Texas, going,
Yeah,
going to Ohio State.
yeah.
There's
I'm
some
getting
thumping.
goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps right now.
There's some thumpings on if you're not a home team, there's some thumpings, but there are potential thumpings in that bracket. So
Yeah, but I like what you said, Mike, with like the game script, right?
yeah,
Get up early, which by the way, we haven't really been a good first quarter team all year, but get up early and run it out. Because get behind and it could get ugly for sure.
Like the worst matchup would be Notre Dame having to go to Miami. I don't even think Miami's good. That's just a horrible matchup for Notre Dame for a million
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
can you
Hasty fans
imagine?
on South Beach. I mean, it's just a mess.
You got Crockett and Tubbs, hanging out, driving their Ferrari Testarossa over to the scene of the crime when Notre Dame lost the 2012 national title game against Alabama. Like we've already gone to Miami in a big game and not so long ago when it was like an even matchup and lost by 40.
Yeah.
So
Wimbush. Yeah.
Then we then we got our asses kicked. Yeah, you're talking Alabama, and then we got our asses kicked playing actual
Oh,
Miami.
that
yeah,
too.
Was that
Yeah.
4 years ago? Something like that.
Hey, we could have a quarterfinal final matchup against BYU. Maybe they put that in Vegas. Be fun to go back to.
I'll play
That's easy.
BYU in Vegas any day of the week.
I know you'd like that. All right. Well, let's have some fun. Let's get some real games. The weather's turning. Let's get some real games. Irish fans enjoy. Um, Go Irish, regardless of the predictions. Let's just have some good football.
Go
Boys,
Irish.
thanks for
Well,
joining me
Irish fans,
again. Mike,
thank you, Cleats
James.
by Dre, for the opportunity to revisit your podcast. Let's catch up before the playoff game.
Let's do it.
Thanks, Cleats. Love you,
All right.
buddy.
Thanks, boys. Peace. All right. Thanks for listening, folks. If you enjoyed that, you enjoy college football, you enjoy Notre Dame, please share around to a friend you could say the same about. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.